You know what makes Hutton special? Ron's vision for Hutton.
He had so much energy and so many he knew and could convince.
Naming it, it had to be Audubon of Kansas, and then somebody said, "Oh, A-OK, that's really a great thing," you know.
One of the reasons that Ron was so successful and has developed a real following in Kansas and following for A-OK is that he's been, and we've been, really the only advocates for conservation in the state. You know, nobody else goes to the legislature to talk about wind towers in the wrong places.
Boy, Ron could talk anybody into anything, I'll tell you. Ron always had these great relationships with the higher up in Audubon, and somehow or other he managed to get them involved big time in both the Platte and the Niobrara. And one of my favorite pictures, they're sitting at the general store. Here's Ron, and here is the head of National Audubon Society, Peter Burley, and they're sitting there at the general store and they're talking, and I'm sure that because of that relationship that he had with Charlie Callison and Peter Burley, I'm sure that this made it very easy for him to be 100% involved in both the Platte and Niobrara River matters. Ron is there and he's explaining a dream, and I just often wonder if he's saying, you know, the next thing we ought to do is get this to be a wild and scenic river, get this included in the nation's wild and scenic river. I always envision him saying that to Peter Burley.
That's where Ron was so great, because he had the vision. And he had the courage to go and talk to all these big shots and get them on our side. The things he did was he got a horse and rode up and down the river road, I think, and stopped at each ranch house and talked to them, give them a pitch, and they saw that he could ride a horse, and they figured, well, he must be okay. Ron asked me if I would be interested in going with him to visit it's the National Parks and Recreation Association office. Didn't know what it was about, and I went with him, and I didn't say anything because I didn't know anything about it. And it turned out what he was doing was working on this agency or this organization in Washington to get funding for the purchase of the Z-Bar Ranch near Strong City. And I think he was successful in getting that, because eventually this outfit, this National Parks and Recreation Association, I believe, came up with the money to purchase the prairie.
Well, see, before Audubon of Kansas, there was the Kansas Audubon Council, which was the coalition of all the chapters in the state. And at one point, Jan Garten was in charge, was president, and they would meet a few to several times each year.
Right.
That the chapter representatives was kind of a natural extension of what we had been doing anyway. But then Ron Klataske knew Bob McElroy and what's the doctor's name you mentioned before, Bill Browning, and Dick Seaton and some of those other folks that just had been supportive, I think, and it made sense to ask them if they would be interested in serving.
Well, I got a letter from Ron in like 1999 asking for donations for this new organization he was planning to start. And so I sent him $100. The next thing I knew, he wanted me to be on the board. So I went to the first meeting, and it was in El Dorado at the old train station, I think it was. And So then I started, I've been on it ever since. This is about, I think in 99 maybe. Bill Browning was our first chair, and then I got involved converting the old Audubon Council, Kansas Audubon Council. It already had a 501c3 designation, so I just converted the name to Audubon of Kansas, and we dissolved that corporation and didn't have to go through the steps again.
I saw Ron and an unidentified man coming into the restaurant, and they sat there and talked for a long time. So and then afterwards I went and got a hold of Ron and said, well, what's all this about? He said, well, I've been talking to this Mr. Hutton about maybe donating his land to Audubon. And so I've talked to him many times and over many years. And I guess it finally paid off, but I don't know how many years he worked on that, but that shows a lot of determination.
We inherited that land from the Huttons, this roughly 5,000 acres, to be run as a combination nature sanctuary and kind of working ranch. And
sanctuaries offer the opportunity to basically educate the public, but not that it has to be that formalized, but just come out, enjoy the day, see the beauty of the place. It's kind of that same sort of, it relaxes you. It might inspire you to look up something, It's just a neat experience to be out. That would be wonderful. And I think if you start out with that, then becoming a birder later on, or a hiker, or somebody that goes out on the river to boat, it just is much more natural and much more likely that you would involve yourself in that. And then you build up an educated, appreciative populace that would stand up for wildlife and wild places. That's my dream.